Welcome back, Nerglings. Today we are looking at goblins. But before we start, be sure to like, share, subscribe, and ring the tallyman's bell so you don't miss an update. A goblin is a monstrous creature from European folklore, first attested in stories from the Middle Ages. They are ascribed various and conflicting abilities, temperaments, and appearances, depending on the story and country of origin. They are almost always small and grotesque, mischievous or outright malicious, and greedy especially for gold and jewellery. They often have magical abilities similar to a fairy or demon. Similar creatures include duendes, gnomes, imps, and kobolds. In English, the term goblin is first recorded in the 14th century and is probably from unattested Anglo-Norman. Gobelin, similar to Old French gobelin, already attested around 1195 in Ambroise of Normandy's Guerre Sainte, and to medieval Latin gobelinus in Orderic Vitalis before 1141, which was the name of a devil or demon haunting the country around Evreux, Normandy. J.R.R. Tolkien used the terms goblin and orc synonymously in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. These works, featuring goblins of almost human stature, inform the depiction of goblins in later fiction and games. William Thompson writes, "In The Hobbit, whose title character resembles the traditional hobgoblin, thinly disguised by name and role, Tolkien's goblins, though villains, retain a hint of earlier portrayals as scamps, with their bumbling efforts punctuated by boisterous and doggerel song, posing little threat to the story's heroes and perhaps reflecting the novel's intended young audience. Yet in notes for the novel, he acknowledges an indebtedness to MacDonald, and while his goblins may appear grotesque, filthy and wicked, preying upon travellers from underground lairs. Thompson adds that, in The Lord of the Rings, Tolkien has abandoned all pretense at depicting goblins in a comic light, instead casting them as the great evil race of Middle-earth. Goblins are portrayed as roughly half the size of adult humans as non-player characters in the tabletop role-playing game Dungeons & Dragons. They are similarly portrayed in Warhammer and the Age of Sigmar, where they are a major calamity pitted against the forces of good. So, let's get into it, shall we? Goblins are the smallest and perhaps the most numerous of the greenskin race. They often live on the cast-offs of other races and frequently thrive in the shadows of their larger, brawnier cousins, the orcs. They are, in general, a miserable, treacherous race of petty thieves and vicious cutthroats. Goblins can be found just about anywhere, but are often divided up between several distinct subspecies that are more unique in their culture and physiology than the common goblin. For instance, the night goblins are famous for living exclusively within cave systems deep underground, and have a strong aversion to sunlight. The forest goblins are known to dwell within the forests, hence their namesake, where their primitive lifestyle and constant worship of spiders makes them an all too common threat for men and lumber communities within the old world. The turquoise-skinned Knobbler are a distinct offshoot of mountain or hill-dwelling goblins living within the slopes and river valleys of the Mountains of Morn. But perhaps the smallest and most pathetic of the goblin species are the snotlings, creatures so dull-witted and simple in their behaviour that they serve no purpose in greenskin society other than as pets or as emergency food. The common goblin can vary greatly in size and habits, but all of them are universally small, scrawny, nimble, and evil-minded. Since most orcs are too lazy or dull-witted to do anything other than fighting, goblins are often used as the primary labour force for many green-screen tribes, often doing menial acts and labours such as hunting, building, herding and crafting. While they lack the size and brute strength of the orcs, they're considerably far more cunning and intelligent by comparison. Goblins possess just enough intelligence to craft simple tools and build crude buildings, traits that are usually non-existent to most orcs within a tribe. Nevertheless, due to their weak and cowardly behaviour in a society that only respects strength and brutality, goblins naturally don't possess a powerful position within orc-dominated tribes. Their character is universally reprehensible. There is no depth of casual cruelty or random violence to which a goblin will not sink if it senses that it has the power to do so. Yet, in the presence of an orc, or even just a larger goblin, it will become suddenly servile and fawning, a slinking cur in fear of its master's whip. Most goblins are extremely weak as individuals, and so they would naturally band together in large groups or mobs as a form of protection. In some cases, goblins have been known to split off from their abusive cousins and form into their own independent goblin tribes. Usually, the most successful goblin tribes consist of either wolf riders that roam the deserts of the Badlands to the south, or night goblin tribes living within the mountains to the east. When in battle, goblins are cowards by nature and would most likely run from the enemy rather than face them in combat. Only in the most overly obvious circumstances where victory is believed a certainty will they actually take up the courage to fight. Goblins normally wear scraps of crude armour and form into their own warbands of lightly armoured infantry equipped with wooden shields, rusted swords or hunting spears. Most goblins, however, prefer to kill their foes at a safe distance, utilising the use of primitive bows and throwing spears to tackle larger or more powerful opponents. In large numbers and with some proper encouragement, a goblin army on the attack would almost always outnumber their opponents by nearly 3 to 1, using their overwhelming numbers as a way to smother their enemy in a lethal green tide. These fantastic little chaps were painted by my pal Litrick, who offered to assist me in my epic task of getting my army painted. And as you can see, he's used a nice high contrast colour scheme that really makes them pop. The models themselves are lead and mounted on hollow lip bases. Whilst goblins are usually based on 20mm bases, I couldn't find any hollows that size, so I had to go with the 25mm ones. I really didn't want to have models mounted on the top of the base, as that can look a bit naff. These miniatures are made from lead, and a good coat of varnish is absolutely essential to preserving them. Once they were painted and sent back to me, I varnished them with quickshade to give them a tough protective coat and hopefully prevent lead rot. Lead can be a fiddly material to work with, especially if you have some models with lead rot. Lead rot is where the metal of the model starts to break down. Whilst there are several reasons postulated as to why this might happen, I suspect the reason is because a less than optimal alloy was created when casting. Parts of this less than perfect mixture oxidize and create a salt-like substance on the surface of the model. Lead rot can totally destroy models if left unchecked, so it is of paramount importance that you varnish any metal models that are from the 80s. You may ask, why the 80s? Well, this is when alloys for casting were starting to be used en masse. Cheap alloys were created to ensure large quantities could be cast. Unfortunately, the alloys created have not stood the test of time. In 1997, Citadel switched to a lead-free white metal because of concerns about lead poisoning, particularly in children. This new material was much tougher to saw, drill, or otherwise manipulate, and models required some serious tools and skill to successfully convert. I will be making a video about lead rot and methods of identifying, preventing and even fixing it. Stay tuned for that in the near future. I hope you enjoyed the video. Which nasty little goblin was your favourite and why? To that end, I would like to end this video there and open up the comments to you. Be sure to like, share, subscribe and ring the tallyman's bell so you can keep up with this huge project. Peace.